The grand chamber of the Galactic Council floated in space like a massive crystal ball, its walls shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. Inside this ancient structure, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that could have held a small city. Each representative looked more strange than the last, with scales, tentacles, wings, and features that would make any human child run screaming. Ambassador Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire stood tall on his forelegs, his reptilian head turning slowly to look at each member of the council. His golden eyes held the weight of 1,000 years, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. The translator devices worn by each member flickered to life, converting his hissing words into their native languages. "Fellow council members," Vextar began, his claws clicking against the crystal table, "we face a problem that grows worse each day. The humans continue to spread across the galaxy like some kind of disease. They build colonies without asking permission. They mine asteroids that belong to established civilizations. They ignore our messages and treat our authority like it means nothing." The crystalline representative, a being made entirely of living glass, chimed in with a sound like wind through broken bottles. "The humans took 3 star systems last month alone. They simply arrived, planted their flags, and started building cities as if they owned the place." A massive creature with too many eyes nodded its boulder-sized head. "My people have sent them 17 official complaints about their mining operations in the Kepler sector. They sent back a form letter thanking us for our interest and suggesting we contact their customer service department." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The void swimmers, beings of pure energy contained in mechanical suits, pulsed with angry red light. The tree people, ancient plant-like creatures who rarely spoke above a whisper, rustled their leaves in what everyone knew was extreme irritation. Vextar raised one clawed hand for silence. "It has been 3 standard years since we first invited the humans to appear before this council. They have ignored every summons, every diplomatic message, every attempt at contact. They act as if we do not exist." "Perhaps," suggested the hive mind representative through its drone speaker, "they are simply too primitive to understand galactic law." "Too primitive?" The crystal being's voice rose to a painful pitch. "These primitives have colonized 47 worlds in the past 5 years. They have faster-than-light travel, fusion power, and artificial gravity. No, they understand perfectly well what they are doing." Hours passed as the council debated. Each species shared stories of human expansion, human ignorance of proper procedures, human refusal to acknowledge galactic authority. The humans had spread through space like water through a broken dam, flowing into every empty corner they could find, and some that were not quite empty. Finally, Vextar called for order. "There is only one solution that remains. The humans must be stopped before they consume the entire galaxy. I call for a formal declaration of war." The vote was unanimous. Even the peace lovers of Sigma Prime, who had not supported military action in over 2,000 years, agreed that humanity had gone too far. The declaration was drafted in the ancient legal language of the First Empire, translated into every known tongue, and prepared for immediate transmission to Earth. Meanwhile, on the distant world of Kepler 442b, Commander Jake Peterson sat in his small office reviewing the weekly trade reports. Jake was one of only 12 human diplomats stationed in alien space, and most days his job felt more like running a shipping office than representing Earth's interests. He was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes, the kind of person who solved problems by filling out the right forms and making sure everyone followed the rules. The subspace communication array in his office suddenly came to life with a sound like an angry cat. Jake looked up from his coffee and pressed the receive button, expecting another complaint about human merchant ships using the wrong hyperspace lanes. Instead, 17 different alien languages poured from the speakers at once, creating a noise that sounded like a dozen orchestras tuning their instruments while fighting a war. Jake winced and adjusted the translator settings until the words became clear. "To the primitive species known as humanity," the message began, "you have violated galactic law. ignored proper authority, and shown complete disrespect for the established order. Your expansion into unauthorized space sectors ends now. You have 72 standard hours to withdraw all human presence from colonized worlds and surrender, unconditionally, to the Galactic Council's authority. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your species. Jake blinked and played the message again. Then he played it a third time to make sure he had heard correctly. He scratched his head, took a sip of coffee, and opened a secure channel to Mars Command Center. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez appeared on his screen. A stern-looking woman in her 50s who had spent most of her career dealing with asteroid miners and freight haulers. She was eating a breakfast sandwich while reviewing the morning reports, and she looked about as interested in Jake's call as she would be in watching paint dry. "Morning, Jake," she said around a bite of sandwich. "What's the crisis today? More complaints about our mining permits?" "Actually, Admiral, we just received a declaration of war from the Galactic Council. They're giving us 72 hours to surrender all our colonies or face total annihilation." Lisa paused mid-chew and looked at him with the expression of someone who had just been told that paper clips were now illegal. "A declaration of war from the space bureaucrats?" "That's right. 17 different alien languages, all very official sounding. They seem pretty upset about our expansion policies." Lisa swallowed her sandwich and shrugged. "Well, I suppose they have the right to be upset. We did kind of ignore their invitation to that council meeting last year, and the year before that." She made a note on her electronic pad. "I'll file this under diplomatic correspondence and forward it to the appropriate department. Anything else?" Jake stared at her. "Admiral, they're threatening to destroy humanity." "Jake, last week the Regulan Trade Union threatened to ban our shipping licenses because we were using the wrong customs forms. The week before that, the Crystal Collective filed a formal complaint because our miners were working too efficiently. These alien governments complain about everything we do. If we panicked every time someone threatened us, we'd never get any work done." She was right, Jake realized. In his 3 years as a diplomat, he had received hundreds of angry messages from alien governments. They complained about human mining techniques, human colony placement, human shipping schedules, human music being too loud, and human food smelling strange. Most of the complaints ended up filed away and forgotten. "Just send them a standard acknowledgement," Lisa continued. "Let them know we received their message and will consider their concerns. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a budget meeting in 10 minutes about the new fusion reactors." The screen went dark, leaving Jake alone with the most serious diplomatic crisis in human history. He looked at the declaration of war one more time, then opened his standard forms folder and began typing a response. On Earth, President Robert Carter was having his morning briefing in the Oval Office when his chief of staff mentioned the alien declaration of war. President Carter was a practical man in his early 60s who had spent most of his political career dealing with budget disputes and trade negotiations. He had the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of handling problems that seemed impossible until someone actually sat down and solved them. "So the aliens are upset about our colonies again?" he asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. "What? Is it this time? Wrong paperwork?" His aide, a nervous young man named Paul, shuffled through his notes. "Actually, sir, they've declared war on us. They want us to surrender all our colonies within 72 hours or they'll destroy humanity." President Carter nodded slowly as if Paul had just told him about a scheduling conflict. "I see. Have we responded yet?" Admiral Rodriguez sent them an acknowledgement form and directed them to file their complaint with the Department of External Affairs. Good, that's the proper procedure." The president took a sip of coffee and turned to look out the window at the White House lawn, where maintenance workers were setting up for the annual Easter egg hunt. "Paul, do you remember what the weather forecast said about this weekend?" "I'm concerned about the baseball season opener." Paul stared at him. "Sir, the aliens are threatening to destroy Earth." "Yes, I heard you the first time." President Carter smiled the same patient smile he used when explaining complex policies to reporters. Paul, in my 20 years in politics, I've been threatened with everything from impeachment to alien invasion, usually by people who were upset about something we were doing perfectly legally. The aliens will calm down once they realize we're not actually doing anything wrong. Meanwhile, at the Earth Institute for Xenobiological Studies, Dr. Emma Walsh was watching the Galactic News Network with the kind of fascination usually reserved for nature documentaries. Emma was a cheerful woman in her 40s who had spent her career studying alien behavior patterns, and she found their current panic absolutely delightful. The alien news anchor, a floating jellyfish-like creature, was speaking in rapid bursts of color that the translator rendered as increasingly frantic updates. Hour 12 of the human crisis continues with no response from Earth. Military analysts are baffled by humanity's apparent indifference to the largest war fleet ever assembled. Dr. Ben Murphy, Emma's research partner, looked up from his computer, where he was analyzing alien communication patterns. Ben was a quiet man who preferred data to people, but even he seemed amused by the current situation. They've been running the same story for 6 hours straight. I don't think they know what to do when someone doesn't immediately panic. Emma laughed and made notes in her research journal. Look at their stress indicators. Heart rate elevated. Chemical markers showing extreme anxiety, communication frequency up 300%. They're more upset about our lack of response than they were about our original expansion. On the screen, the news switched to an interview with a Galactic Council military expert, a creature that looked like an angry tree with too many eyes. The translator struggled with its rapid, overlapping speech patterns. Human behavior makes no strategic sense. They should be mobilizing fleets, calling emergency sessions, sending desperate messages begging for mercy. Instead, their colonies are operating normally. Their shipping continues on schedule, and their government appears to be planning some kind of sporting event. Ben pulled up the Earth communication logs on his screen. You know what's really funny? Our news networks aren't even covering this story. Channel 7 did a 30-second piece about more alien bureaucracy drama, and then spent 10 minutes on a cat that can skateboard. Indeed, across Earth, life continued exactly as it always had. On New Texas Colony, Administrator Kate Johnson was reviewing applications for new mining permits while her assistant brought her lunch. Kate was a practical woman who had spent 15 years turning empty planets into thriving communities, and she had no time for cosmic drama. "Ma'am," her assistant said, setting down a sandwich, "I'm getting reports that some kind of alien council has declared war on humanity." Kate looked up from the permit applications with mild interest. "Oh, are they the ones who were complaining about our mining techniques last month?" "I think so, ma'am. They're demanding we abandon all our colonies. How nice for them." Kate signed another permit and reached for her sandwich. "Make sure to file their complaint with the proper department. And remind them that if they want to discuss mining rights, they need to go through the Colonial Resource Board. We can't have people just making demands without following proper procedures." Similar scenes played out across human space. On Europa Station, engineer Tony Garcia was repairing a fusion reactor when someone mentioned the war declaration. Tony was a solid, dependable man who had kept the station running smoothly for 8 years. And he treated galactic politics the same way. He treated reactor maintenance as someone else's problem unless it directly affected his work. "Are they planning to attack the station?" he asked, not looking up from his diagnostic readings. "Nobody knows. They just said they were going to destroy humanity if we don't surrender." Tony shrugged and continued his work. "Well, let me know if they actually show up. Otherwise, I've got 3 more reactors to service before my shift ends." The 72-hour deadline approached with all the drama of a library closing time. Human colonies continued their daily routines. Human ships maintained their shipping schedules, and human administrators processed their paperwork with the same methodical efficiency they had always shown. The only sign that anything unusual was happening came from the alien observers stationed throughout human space. Every species that had diplomatic missions in human territory was sending increasingly frantic reports back to their home governments. The crystalline observer on Mars sent a message that translated roughly as, The humans are either incredibly stupid or incredibly confident. I cannot determine which possibility is more terrifying. The Void Swimmer representative in the asteroid belt reported, "Human mining operations continue at normal efficiency." They appear to view the war declaration as a minor administrative inconvenience. As the deadline passed, Admiral Rodriguez finally composed a brief response to the Galactic Council. She was sitting in her office on Mars, surrounded by shipping schedules and maintenance reports, when her aide reminded her that the aliens were probably waiting for some kind of official answer. Oh, right, the space bureaucrats. She pulled up a standard diplomatic template on her computer and spent 5 minutes filling it out. The message was professional, polite, and completely unhelpful. The Earth Colonial Administration acknowledges. Receipt of your communication dated Galactic Standard Calendar, 4847.3. Please be advised that all territorial disputes must be filed through proper channels using Form 23B, available from the Department of External Affairs. Processing time for formal complaints is currently 6 to 8 standard weeks. Thank you for your patience. She sent the message and immediately forgot about it, turning her attention back to a more pressing problem involving delayed cargo shipments. From the outer colonies, the alien response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting the human reply, analyzing every word for hidden meanings, secret codes, or signs of either surrender or defiance. Military experts debated whether the message represented sophisticated psychological warfare or complete incompetence. The truth, as Emma Walsh noted in her research journal, was much simpler and far more disturbing to the alien mind. The humans genuinely did not consider the Galactic Council's threats to be particularly important. They had work to do, schedules to maintain, and problems to solve. A declaration of war from a group of bureaucrats they had never met ranked somewhere below equipment maintenance and shipping delays on their list of daily concerns. As Emma watched the alien news networks dissolve into chaos over humanity's casual dismissal of their ultimate threat, she couldn't help but smile. "Ben," she said to her colleague, "I think we're about to learn a lot about how different species handle existential confusion." The largest war fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of mechanical locusts. 3,000 ships from 12 different civilizations hung in space, their weapons charged and their crews ready for the glorious battle that would finally put humanity in its proper place. The flagship, a massive dreadnought called Universal Justice, dwarfed everything around it with its kilometer-long hull bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. Supreme Fleet Commander Zethmar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays that showed Earth's pathetic defenses. Zethmar was a veteran of over 100 campaigns, a Krellian warrior whose 4 arms bore the scars of countless battles. His red eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never lost a war, and his mandibles clicked with anticipation as he reviewed the human positions. "Intelligence reports confirm minimal human military presence," his tactical officer reported. "A few patrol ships, some cargo vessels, and what appears to be a small defense grid around their homeworld. Nothing that could threaten even a single squadron of our fighters." Zethmar nodded, his lower arms clasped behind his back while his upper arms gestured at the display. "As expected, the humans may be stubborn, but they are not stupid. They know they cannot match our firepower." He turned to his communications officer, a nervous Zephyrian with scales that kept changing color. "Open a channel to all ships. It is time to announce our arrival." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their engines leaving trails of exotic particles across the darkness of space. They had practiced this maneuver for months, coordinating the movements of 12 different ship designs into a display of overwhelming force that had terrified civilizations across half the galaxy. They had traveled less than an hour into the system when a single small ship appeared on their sensors. The vessel was barely 50 meters long, painted in the blue and white colors of Earth's civilian fleet, and it was flying directly toward the invasion force with the casual confidence of someone heading to a grocery store. Single human vessel. Approaching, the sensor operator announced. Designation ESV Denver, registry shows it as a patrol ship. Zethmar's mandibles clicked in amusement. One ship? They send one tiny ship to face the might of the galactic fleet? The communications. Board lit up with an incoming message from the human vessel. Zethmar gestured for his officer to accept the transmission, expecting to hear desperate pleas for mercy or perhaps some last brave words before the humans were destroyed. Instead, a tired-looking human face appeared on the screen. The man was middle-aged with graying hair and the kind of patient expression usually seen on people who dealt with difficult customers all day. He was wearing a simple blue uniform and drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's Most Average Dad." "Unknown vessels," the human said in a conversational tone. "You're entering restricted shipping lanes. Please state your business and comply with Sol System Navigation Authority." The bridge of the Universal Justice fell silent. Zethmar stared at the screen, his red eyes wide with disbelief. This human was treating the largest invasion fleet in galactic history like they were tourists who had taken a wrong turn. Captain Rick Stone of the ESV Denver took another sip of coffee while he waited for a response. Rick was a former cargo hauler who had taken the patrol job because it was quiet, peaceful work that let him spend most of his time reading mystery novels and enjoying the view of space. He had been tracking the approaching fleet for hours, and while their numbers were impressive, they were clearly foreign vessels who probably didn't know the local traffic regulations. "Sir," Zethmar's communications officer whispered, "how should we respond?" Zethmar activated the transmission with one of his upper hands while his lower hands clenched into fists. "Human, I am Supreme Fleet Commander Zethmar of the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet. We are here to accept your species' surrender and enforce the Council's authority over this system." Rick nodded politely and consulted a tablet computer. "Oh, that. Yeah. You'll need to file a Form 47C with the Colonial Administration Office on Mars. They handle all territorial disputes." He scrolled through his screen with the same bored efficiency of a government clerk. "Next available appointment is, let me check, Tuesday, 3 weeks from now. You can request an emergency hearing, but you'll need to provide documentation of immediate threat to civilian populations." The alien commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation that his bridge crew had learned to fear. "We are the immediate threat. We have 3,000 warships demanding your surrender." "Right, I can see that," Rick said, glancing at his sensors. "Big fleet you got there. Very impressive, but like I said, I just direct traffic. You want to file a complaint about our territorial claims? You need to talk to management? I can give you the forms if you want, but you'll have to fill them out in triplicate." One of Zethmar's tactical officers leaned over to whisper in his commander's ear, "Sir, this could be a delaying tactic. Perhaps we should simply destroy his ship and proceed with the invasion." Zethmar considered this, but something about the human's casual attitude was deeply unsettling. In his 100 campaigns, he had faced desperate enemies, brave enemies, and clever enemies. He had never faced an enemy who treated his invasion fleet like a minor paperwork problem. "Human," he said slowly, "you do realize we could destroy your tiny ship with a single shot?" Rick looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would you want to do that?" "I'm just trying to help you follow proper procedures. Look, if you're in some kind of hurry, I can radio ahead to Mars Control and see if they can squeeze you in earlier. But honestly, 3 weeks isn't that long to wait for a hearing." The Supreme Fleet Commander found himself in the unprecedented position of being utterly confused by an enemy's response. Every tactical manual, every strategic guide, every piece of military wisdom he had ever learned was based on the assumption that opponents would react predictably to shows of force. They would surrender, fight, or try to negotiate. They did not offer to help you fill out forms. "Sir," his navigation officer called out, "we're receiving more communication requests from other human vessels in the system. Cargo ships asking about our destination, a mining crew wondering if we need directions, and something called a tour guide service offering to show us the sights." Rick finished his coffee and set the mug aside. "Tell you what, Commander Zethmar. I'm going to send you the contact information for our Colonial Affairs office. They're really the ones you want to talk to about this whole territorial dispute thing. In the meantime, you'll need to move your fleet to the designated visitor parking area. You're blocking the main shipping lane, and we've got a big cargo convoy coming through in about 2 hours. Visitor parking? Zethmar's voice rose to a pitch that made his bridge crew wince. Standard regulation for non-commercial vessels over a certain size? Don't worry, it's free for the first 72 hours. After that, there's a small daily fee, but I'm sure you guys won't be here that long once you get your paperwork sorted out. The human transmitted a set of coordinates and signed off with a cheerful "Welcome to the Sol System and have a great day." Leaving the bridge of the Universal Justice in stunned silence, Zethmar stared at the coordinates for several long minutes while his officers waited for orders. Finally, his communications officer cleared his throat. "Sir, should we destroy the human vessel and proceed with the invasion?" "No," Zethmar said quietly. "Take us to the visitor parking area." "Sir, you heard me? Take us to the parking area." He slumped into his command chair, suddenly feeling very old and very tired. "I need to think about this." As the massive invasion fleet obediently moved to the coordinates provided by Captain Rick Stone, word of the encounter spread throughout the human colonies at light speed. The reaction was typically understated. Shipping companies adjusted their schedules to account for increased traffic. The Colonial Administration Office ordered extra coffee for what looked like a busy few weeks, and someone in the Sol System Tourism Board started designing brochures for their unexpected visitors. Admiral Rodriguez received a brief report about the alien fleet's arrival and filed it under routine diplomatic contacts. She was much more concerned about a fusion reactor malfunction on Europa that was threatening to delay the quarterly supply shipments. After 3 days sitting in the visitor parking area like cosmic tourists, Supreme Fleet Commander Zethmar was beginning to understand why his officers were getting restless. The mighty invasion fleet had received welcome packets from the Sol System Tourism Board, dinner recommendations from local restaurants, and 17 different offers for guided tours of the inner planets. None of this was covered in any military manual he had ever read. The final straw came when his intelligence officer reported that human cargo ships were flying past their position with complete indifference, some of them actually waving as they went by. One freighter captain had even radioed to ask if they needed directions to anything specific. "This is intolerable," Zethmar announced to his senior staff. "We came here to demonstrate galactic authority, not to be treated like confused tourists. If the humans will not acknowledge our power through diplomacy, we will show them through action." His tactical officer, a young Krellian eager for his first real battle, leaned forward excitedly. "Finally, what are your orders, sir?" "We will conduct a limited strike against one of their mining facilities. Something impressive enough to demonstrate our capabilities, but not so destructive as to prevent their eventual surrender." Zethmar studied the tactical display, looking for a suitable target. The asteroid mining complex around Ceres. It appears to be lightly defended and economically important. The fleet moved toward the asteroid belt with renewed purpose, their crews finally preparing for the kind of decisive action they had trained for. Zethmar felt his confidence returning as his ships fell into attack formation. Humans might be strange, but they would understand the language of superior firepower. At the Ceres mining complex, Chief Operations Manager Amy Wright was having a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. Amy was a no-nonsense woman in her 30s, who had spent 8 years turning the asteroid belt into the most efficient mining operation in human space. She took pride in running a tight operation where everything worked exactly as it was supposed to. She was eating a ham sandwich and reviewing the daily production reports when her sensor operator called out from across the control room. "Ma'am, we've got incoming traffic from the direction of that big alien fleet. Looks like about 200 small ships heading our way." Amy glanced at the display while taking another bite of her sandwich. The approaching ships were clearly military vessels, bristling with weapons and flying in aggressive attack formations. She had seen similar patterns during training simulations, back when she was in the Colonial Defense Force. "Probably want to take a closer look at our operation," she said calmly. "Make sure all the safety protocols are active. Last thing we need is some tourist getting hurt because they flew too close to a mining laser." The series complex was impressive. By any standard, a collection of massive platforms and automated systems that could strip mine an asteroid, down to its component molecules in a matter of hours. Dozens of robotic mining ships moved through the field like mechanical sharks, their industrial lasers carving through rock and metal with terrifying precision. The alien attack force approached in textbook formation, expecting to face defensive positions and military resistance. Instead, they found what looked like the most organized construction site in the galaxy, with work crews going about their business and mining equipment operating on precise schedules. Zethmar watched from his flagship as his fighters began their attack run. Target the main processing platforms. Avoid hitting any ships that might contain civilians. The alien fighters opened fire with their plasma cannons, expecting to see explosions and panic. Instead, something very strange happened. The moment their weapons lit up the darkness, every piece of mining equipment in the asteroid field suddenly turned toward them with mechanical precision. Amy, Wright looked up from her sandwich as alarms began sounding throughout the control center. Not emergency alarms, but the standard safety warnings that activated whenever foreign objects entered active work zones. Automated systems are detecting navigational hazards in sectors 7 through 12, her safety officer reported. Multiple small objects moving erratically through the mining field. "Well, that's not good," Amy said, setting down her sandwich and moving to the main control console. "Can't have random debris flying around while the crews are working. OSHA would have our heads." She pressed a series of switches with practiced efficiency. Activate pest control protocols. Clear the work zone. What the aliens had mistaken for a lightly defended mining operation was actually the most sophisticated, automated industrial complex in human space. Every piece of equipment was designed to identify and eliminate anything that might pose a danger to the work crews, whether it was a loose asteroid, a malfunctioning robot, or apparently a formation of attacking fighters, the mining lasers that could cut through solid rock like butter retargeted with computer-controlled precision. Industrial greepers designed to move 1,000-ton asteroids locked onto alien fighters with mechanical determination. Automated haulers that normally carried or began ramming into anything that registered as foreign interference. The result was devastating. Alien fighters that had been designed to battle military starships found themselves being systematically dismantled by equipment meant for industrial construction. Their sophisticated armor and energy shields, calibrated to deflect weapons fire, proved useless against mining tools that approached every problem as a simple matter of applied physics. "Ma'am," the sensor operator called out, "we're getting some kind of distress signals from those foreign objects. Should I patch them through?" Amy glanced at the display, which showed the automated systems efficiently clearing the work zone of all foreign debris. "No, that's just feedback from the safety sensors. The systems are working exactly as designed." She picked up her sandwich and took another bite. "Make a note in the log that we had some navigational hazards in the mining field. I'll file a report with traffic control so they can update the safety warnings." Aboard his flagship, Zethmar watched in horror as 2 squadrons of his best fighters were systematically destroyed by what appeared to be construction equipment. The humans were not even treating it as a battle. Their mining operation continued exactly as before, with work crews going about their duties while automated systems eliminated the alien presence with the same casual efficiency they would use to clear away space debris. "Sir," his tactical officer said in a shaking voice, "we're receiving surrender requests from the survivors of the attack squadrons." "Surrender requests?" "They're asking the humans to stop shooting so they can evacuate their damaged ships." The human response was to transfer them to someone called customer service. Zethmar stared at the tactical display, watching as the few surviving fighters limped away from the mining complex. The humans had just destroyed a major military Strike force using civilian equipment operated by people who seemed to think they had simply cleared away some space junk. His communications officer looked up from her console with an expression of complete bewilderment. Sir, we're receiving a message from the mining complex. They're apologizing for the inconvenience and offering to help repair our damaged ships. What? The message says, and I quote, "Sorry about the misunderstanding with our automated safety systems. If any of your vessels were damaged while touring our facility, please contact our insurance department for compensation claims. We hope you enjoyed your visit to the Ceres mining complex, and please fly safely." Zethmar slumped into his command chair, feeling the weight of a military career that no longer made any sense. His forces had just been defeated by people who thought they were providing customer service. News of the engagement spread quickly through both human and alien communication networks, but with very different interpretations. The alien news services reported it as a catastrophic military defeat, analyzing the humans' brilliant use of disguised weapons and tactical deception. Human news barely covered it at all, except for a brief report about equipment malfunctions at Ceres causing minor delays in ore shipments. On Earth, the stock market actually rose as investors realized that the alien crisis was driving demand for human industrial equipment across the galaxy. Several military analysts from other species had already placed orders for defensive mining systems based on what they had observed at Ceres. Amy Wright finished her sandwich, filed her safety report, and returned to reviewing the daily production numbers. It had been a slightly more eventful Tuesday than usual, but the mining operation was back on schedule, and that was what really mattered. She made a mental note to recommend her safety officer for a bonus. The automated systems had performed exactly as designed, and OSHA would be pleased with their response time. Supreme Fleet Commander Zethmar had commanded fleets that conquered star systems and brought mighty civilizations to their knees, but he had never felt as confused and defeated as he did sitting in the small basement office of Colonel Sam Mitchell in the Pentagon. The office was cramped, filled with metal filing cabinets and stacks of papers, and smelled faintly of coffee and bureaucracy. It was possibly the least impressive place any galactic conqueror had ever been forced to surrender. Colonel Mitchell was a thin man in his 50s who looked like he had spent most of his career pushing papers rather than fighting battles. His desk was covered with forms, reports, and half-empty coffee cups, and he had the patient expression of someone who spent his days dealing with problems that nobody else wanted to handle. When Zethmar had demanded to meet with Earth's military leadership, this was apparently the best they could do. "So," Colonel Mitchell said, leaning back in his chair and consulting a clipboard, "you're here about the territorial dispute filing. I have to say, Commander, your approach to the complaint process has been rather unusual." Zethmar's forearms were folded across his chest, and his red eyes burned with the frustration of a warrior who no longer understood the nature of war. "Colonel, I came here to accept your planet's surrender. My fleet has been defeated by your mining equipment. Your people treat our invasion as a minor administrative inconvenience. I must know, how are you so powerful while appearing so weak?" Colonel Mitchell set down his coffee and pulled out a fresh form from one of his desk drawers. "Well, Commander, I think there might be some confusion about what we're actually doing here. You see, we're not particularly powerful in the way you're thinking about it. We just have a different approach to solving problems." "Different how?" Zethmar leaned forward, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "Your species ignores galactic authority, expands without permission, and defeats military fleets with civilian equipment. This suggests either incredible arrogance or incredible strength." Sam smiled the patient smile of someone who had spent 20 years explaining complex regulations to confused contractors. "Neither, actually. Look, Commander, can I ask you something? When your people want to build a new colony, what's the process?" Zethmar blinked, confused by the change of subject. "We submit a formal request to the appropriate council committee, who reviews it and assigns it to a subcommittee for detailed analysis. The subcommittee prepares a report that goes to the regional authority, who forwards it to the galactic planning. Board, if approved, it returns through the same channels for final authorization. How long does that take? For a simple colony, usually about 3 to 5 standard years. Sam nodded and made a note on his form. Right, and what happens if someone needs to make changes to the colony plan after it's approved? The entire process begins again. Okay. Sam reached into another drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is our colony application form. It's 2 pages long, takes about an hour to fill out, and gets approved or rejected within 2 weeks. If you need to make changes, you file an amendment form that takes another week to process. Zethmar stared at the form as if it were some kind of alien artifact. That is impossible. How do you ensure proper oversight? How do you prevent conflicts with existing territories? How do you maintain quality control? We figure that stuff out as we go along, Sam shrugged. Look, Commander, your people have been running the galaxy for what, 1,000 years? You've got everything organized, categorized, and regulated down to the smallest detail. That's very impressive, but it also means you've forgotten how to adapt when something unexpected happens. The alien commander's lower arms clenched into fists. Adapt? We have conquered hundreds of worlds. We have maintained galactic peace for centuries. Sure. But when was the last time you actually had to solve a new problem? Sam asked. Not manage an existing situation or follow an established procedure, but really solve something that nobody had figured out before? Zethmar opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He thought about the endless committee meetings, the formal protocols, the careful procedures that governed every aspect of galactic civilization. When had he last encountered a problem that did not have a regulation covering it? Before he could answer, the office door opened and Dr. Helen Carter walked in carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of professional smile that suggested she dealt with difficult situations for a living. Helen was a woman in her 40s who had spent her career studying how different species interacted, and she had the calm confidence of someone who understood complicated problems. Sorry, I'm late, she said, setting her briefcase on Sam's desk and pulling out a chair. I got caught in traffic. Commander Zethmar and Dr. Carter from the Institute for Xenosociological Studies. I understand you're having some concerns about our expansion policies. Zethmar turned to face this new human, his red eyes narrowing. Dr. Carter, your species has violated every principle of galactic order. You ignore proper authority, expand without permission, and show complete disrespect for established law. Helen nodded sympathetically, as if he had just complained about a billing error. I can see why that would be frustrating from your perspective. The thing is, Commander, we're not actually trying to disrespect anyone. We're just trying to get things done efficiently. Efficiently? Zethmar's voice rose to a pitch that made both humans wince. You call ignoring galactic law efficient? Well, yes, actually. Helen opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Commander, did you know that in the time it took your council to organize this invasion fleet, humanity established 17 new colonies, opened 43 new trade routes, and solved 2 major interstellar shipping bottlenecks that had been slowing commerce for the entire sector? She spread several charts across Sam's desk, each one showing human expansion and development over the past few years. While your people were holding meetings about our expansion, we were busy expanding. While you were debating whether we had the right to mine certain asteroids, we were already mining them and selling the materials to civilizations that needed them. Zethmar studied the charts, his military training allowing him to quickly grasp the scope of human activity. The numbers were staggering. In just 5 years, humanity had accomplished more development and expansion than most civilizations managed in decades. This is chaos, he said finally. How do you maintain order? How do you prevent conflicts? How do you ensure that resources are distributed fairly? We don't, Helen said simply. Not in the way you're thinking about it, anyway. Instead of trying to control everything from the top down, we let people solve problems locally and then share the solutions with everyone else. Sam pulled out another file from his desk drawer. Commander, remember that supply crisis your people had last year in the Vega sector? The one where 3 different committees spent 6 months trying to figure out how to get emergency food supplies to the outer colonies? Zethmar nodded slowly. The crisis had been a major diplomatic embarrassment for the Council. A human freight. Companies solved that problem in 2 weeks, Sam continued. Not because anyone ordered them to, but because they saw a business opportunity. They rerouted their shipping network, negotiated new supply contracts, and had food flowing to those colonies before your committees had even finished forming subcommittees to study the problem. Helen leaned forward. That's what you're really dealing with, Commander. It's not that humanity is more powerful than the Galactic Council. It's that we approach problems differently. When we see something that needs to be done, we do it. When we encounter an obstacle, we find a way around it. When someone tells us something is impossible, we usually try it anyway just to see what happens. Zethmar sat in silence for several long minutes, processing what he had learned. Finally, he looked up at the 2 humans. So what happens now? My fleet is defeated, my mission has failed, and I no longer understand the nature of the conflict I was sent to resolve. Sam and Helen exchanged glances. Actually, Commander, Helen said carefully, we were hoping you might be able to help us with a different kind of problem. What do you mean? Helen pulled out one more document from her briefcase. The Galactic Council has been having some serious efficiency problems lately. Supply chain issues, communication delays, administrative bottlenecks. We've been getting complaints from businesses and colonies across the sector about how long it takes to get anything approved or resolved. You want our help? Zethmar's voice was barely above a whisper. Not military help, Sam clarified quickly. Technical assistance, process improvement. Maybe some training on streamlined decision-making procedures. The kind of stuff we're apparently pretty good at. Zethmar stared at them both, then began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle but grew into the kind of deep, exhausted laughter that comes after a very long day of trying to solve an impossible problem. You want to help us become more efficient? Why not? Helen smiled. Seems like it would be better for everyone if the galactic government actually worked properly. Less frustration all around. The Supreme Fleet Commander who had come to Earth to accept humanity's surrender found himself nodding in agreement. Very well. I will recommend to the Council that we